Let's take a look at today's topic. What is stopping China and the United States from becoming allies?
The first person answered, it's the US hostility towards China.
Historically, China has shown more friendliness towards the US, while the US perceives China as an enemy and rival. This is something China has had to accept and navigate, similar to how the US views Russia and restricts the EU from forming independent armed forces. The US has always needed enemies to justify certain actions, like supporting dictatorships or attacking other nations, and selling the narrative of being the leader of the free world.
For most countries, the thought of being the US's enemy is a nightmare, but the US relies on this adversarial model for economic reasons. The second person answered, in 1972, President Nixon proposed an alliance with China during a meeting with Mao, but Mao declined, stating that when two countries have common interests, they naturally work together. What Mao hinted at, and what Dr. Kissinger knew well, was that China's main concern was the US forming an anti-China alliance with Russia. China's stance was clear. I don't need allies. I just need you not to treat me as an enemy. In contrast, the US has a binary view of alliances, summed up by President George W. Bush's statement, you are either with us or against us.
This stark difference in approach underlines why the two nations struggle to form an alliance.
Another perspective. The US often exports its domestic problems internationally, while China focuses on handling issues within its borders.
For instance, the US has taken a global approach to its drug problem, leading to military interventions in Latin America, while China tightened its borders and implemented strong anti-drug policies domestically.
Similarly, in its fight against terrorism, China handled the Xinjiang situation internally, while the US invaded multiple countries under the War on Terror. This fundamental difference in handling global issues further distances the two nations. There are alliances in areas where interests overlap, such as trade, climate change, and combating diseases like Ebola.
However, China's definition of being a good global citizen is simply not causing trouble for other countries.
This differs significantly from how the US defines an alliance, which often involves a more interventionist approach.
Finally, despite the geographical and strategic realities suggesting that China and the US should be friends, immediate common enemies tend to take precedence.
Historically, China and the US were allies against Japan during World War II.
Ironically, today, Japan is a close ally of the US despite the past, showing how short-term threats can realign relationships.
The US's dominance over the world's waters naturally creates conflicts with coastal nations that don't share common enemies, complicating any potential alliance with China.